Bruce Nilles is renowned for his transformative work in transitioning the United States away from coal and towards clean energy. As the founder and lead strategist of the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign, Bruce led efforts that ultimately secured the retirement of over half the US coal fleet.
He now leads Climate Imperative, a foundation essentially making sure that the people shaping climate policy, from policymakers to community groups, have everything they need to get it right. And we're excited to chat with him about his next big Climate Impossible project. Right. Thank you for coming back. It is nice up here. That's what I'm going to say. Is it's a pleasant experience. People do come back. Right. You did something with others that once seemed impossible. Can you tell us about it?
What a treat to be here, because it was 5 years ago in the depths of COVID, and it remains one of the highlights during that dark period. So what a thrill to be back. So if you can go back 20 years, George Bush is in the White House. Dick Cheney is his vice president, who hails from Wyoming. And they unleashed a plan to build more than 200 proposed coal plants in the United States. I was a new Sierra Club staffer in Illinois, and it's in the heartland of the country. And these coal plants started appearing, new projects all over the place. So I knew enough about climate change and realized that if we built these coal plants, it was going to be game over for the planet if we locked in for another 50 years. And so put together a rudimentary PowerPoint and traveled around the country, talking to donors and partners, and two fascinating responses. One was a bunch of people saying, Bruce, it's half our energy. We can't get rid of coal. You can't stop these coal plants. It's impossible. And these were the energy experts. And these were the reasonable politicians. And these were too many people. But the beautiful thing was there was a bunch of people who were living where these proposed coal plants were who had said, hell no. We don't want these stinking coal plants, and we're going to do everything we can to stop them. And so after being told it's impossible, I have the pleasure of having a 13-year-old daughter, and when I wanted to do something, I tell her it's impossible. And so people telling me impossible was like this red flag telling me, like, you should work out what to do. And I think the most important part was we started, but we also got inspired by two amazing things happening around the world. One was right here in England. There was an epic fight to stop the last proposed coal plant in the United Kingdom called King's North. And these scrappy group of activists did what everyone said was impossible. They stopped it. And then there was an example in the United States. It was a group of volunteers in Kentucky. And those of you who know the United States, Kentucky is the heart of coal country. Think of like the place that at one time produced the most coal in the United States. And it was the largest coal mining company in the world at the time, Peabody, and they said, we're going to build this giant coal plant. All the policymakers wanted it, and this local group of volunteers held bake sales. This was before Jennifer Kidd. Held bake sales to raise enough money for their lawyers and experts. And they put on an 86-day hearing, the longest in state history, and stopped this coal plant. And we're like, if they can do that in the heart of coal country, we can do this anywhere. And so we set off to both stop the new coal plants, which we did in about 8 years. We stopped 90% of them. But then we turned our attention to the bigger part of the question, which was the existing coal plants. Because we'd stopped the problem getting worse, but there was still 530 coal plants. And that was that's been the last 15 years. And I'm very happy to report we're now at almost 3/4 of the coal plants that are done. There was 530, 140 left to go. And not only that, we've replaced it with record amounts of clean energy. So this past month, it used to be 50% of our energy was coal. Last month, it was 12%. And it was exceeded by solar. So we made the impossible possible.
I mean, it is kind of incredible. And you say it so we just did the first thing, we stopped them all, and then we moved on to the second thing, we did all of that, just as you do on a Tuesday. There was a point at which you were a smaller campaign and you were doing this work, and there was a transformative moment. And I would love for you to tell us a bit about that moment, because I think that, it goes to the heart of what Jennifer was speaking about as well.
So we were able to stop the new coal plants on a fairly shoestring budget, bake sales and a bunch of others helping to support that work. But when we turned our attention to the existing coal plants, it was a whole different kettle of fish. People told us, again, it's impossible. Stopping new coal plants is one thing, because they never existed, and there's 10 permits, and if you stop one, you win. An existing coal plant is in a community, providing electricity with real workers and keeping the lights on. And so we had a lot of people say, well, that's fundamentally different. And it is harder. I don't want to minimize for a second. It's harder retiring and replacing an existing coal plant. So we started trying to test out, could we do it? And the answer was yes. We actually began to have some success, one here and one there. And then the question was, how do we scale it? Because we have 530, we've got to get going. This is an urgent problem. And so we were casting around for how do we scale this work? And that's when we met the former mayor of New York City, Michael Bloomberg. He had just launched an environmental program through his philanthropic through his philanthropy, and he cared desperately about public health. So one of the things Michael Bloomberg is most famous for is when he was mayor of New York City, he wanted to understand why the kids who have asthma are concentrated in certain places. So he tested around the city, and it turned out they were on the major thoroughfares where all the damn trucks were. So it was the diesel trucks, same in most every city. And so he did amazing work and cared lots about and understood the impacts of health from burning of fossil fuels. Well, coal plants are just as bad, if not worse. And so we approached him. He initially was like, yeah, I'm not sure. It's the Sierra Club. I'm not doing that kind of stuff. Coal, I don't know anything about coal. But he's like, what could you do? But then he asked the most profound question of all, what would it take to win? Which no one had ever asked us. We'd been like, well, we can get one coal plant for this amount of money and two coal plants for that amount of money. He was like, no. What would it take to win? And that was just like this moment, like, what? Like, really? Like get rid of coal? And so then the hard part started, because we had to answer that question from a guy who started a data company, and we spent 9 months. And to his credit, he sent over one of his top data analysts who sat down with us and analyzed every single coal plant in the United States. And not only each of the 530, but each of them had 2 or 3 boilers. So we analyzed 1,278 coal boilers. How old? Was it particularly dirty? What were these pollution controls? Was it living in a community where people had been complaining about air pollution and the regulators had never done anything? And so we were able to assess, and we had more data on the coal plant than anybody else in the United States by the time we were done. My head hurt, but it was profound. And we went back to him and said, all right, Mr. Mayor, you asked us, and the answer is we think we can get the first third of it shut down over the next 4 years. It will cost us $147 million. And he looked at us and said, okay, I'll give you 50. I'll help you raise 50, and you raise 47. So we did, and 4 years later, we had got 92% of those coal plants we promised to shut down.
I always think, see, this is my problem with fundraising, because I always think I would just be like, give us all of it then. You've got it. It's not like you don't have it, but fair. Good strategy. Well done. And what an incredible situation to find yourself in. I'm so interested in, like, when you had that conversation. Was it a phone call? Was it an email? Like, how did that happen? Face to face. So you sit face to face with this guy, the former mayor, and he says he'll give you 50 million. How drunk did you get?
I don't know if it gets on the final tape, but his answer was, and by the way, if I give it to you, don't fuck it up. I'm like, okay. Well, it was noon in New York City, so we walked out of his office, walked to the first bar, and had a couple of shots of tequila, and then we got to work. But it was also a profound moment, because we were standing on the shoulders of all these people across the country who were super excited about doing something about these filthy coal plants, and now we had the resources to help. Yeah. And so it was like, oh, we caught the big fish. Now we need to land it. Yeah.
So what, tell us the rest of the
So, all right, so we landed the fish. So what was needed? Well, what was super interesting as we analyzed these coal plants is there was a ton of places where people actually wanted to do something. These were mayors in cities. These were neighbors living next to a coal plant. And they said, we want to do something about replacing this coal plant. It's been polluting our neighborhood too much, or we have climate goals and we want to cut pollution. Or we want to invest in the future. We want clean technology in our community, not this outdated 19th century coal plant. And so the money was used for a variety of things needed to help them, empower them to get the things they needed in order to retire the coal plant. So in many places it was, well, how bad is the air pollution? So we hired modelers to go out and assess. Where was the pollution going? Where are the schools? Where's the hospital? Can we analyze the number of premature deaths from that coal plant? We hired lawyers and experts to engage in every regulatory proceeding relating to those coal plants. We went through the compliance record of every coal plant. If we found non-compliance, we either tried to negotiate before filing a lawsuit. If they wouldn't negotiate, we filed a lawsuit to bring them into compliance. We hired organizers to help educate the community about, you don't have to tolerate this filthy coal plant. There's a better future. Look what's happening around the country and around the world. And so it's that community by community, helping support them in whatever way was needed to be able to make the transition, retire their coal plant, and invest in cleaner, safer alternatives.
Was there a moment in all of this where it started to feel like we're not going to be able to do this, or a moment where it just started to get a bit scary? Because you're taking on big companies with very vested interests. I'm sure they weren't just like, sure, no problem, guys. Like, we'll close.
We'll close them,
Yeah. Well, I had the great privilege of working for a national organization, which was helpful. And with the full faith and credit of Michael Bloomberg behind us, we also were able to deal with some pretty horrendous situations. So, for example, we found a coal plant in East Texas, rural East Texas, that was violating its permit. We filed in federal court. We were making great progress. 6 months in, everything was going great. And then one day we get a bunch of rulings from this judge. We are losing on every count. And by the way, we owe the other side $6 million in attorney's fees. If we'd been a small nonprofit, we would have been out of business. If we had not had the backing of Michael Bloomberg, we would have gone out of business. And so corporations engage in those kind of harassment tactics all the time. But for once, it was a fair fight. Now, our CFO was really upset. Our executive director was really upset. And we ultimately negotiated out without paying and agreeing not to sue them for a few months. But the risk, if we'd been a small group, is that we would have put out of business. And I think the other example I would give is 2016, Donald Trump is elected the first time. Everyone was like, there's no way you're going to keep retiring coal plants. No way. His whole campaign was Trump digs coal. We retired more coal plants during his first term than we did in the second term of Barack Obama. So the power of community organizing, despite whatever's happening in Washington, and I think there's some lessons for that today, don't underestimate what we can get done in the states and the local level, despite the madness in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I think that is a clap. I think so. Because I was going to ask you about that. Like, is he reversing all the work? But I'm not even going to ask that question because I don't think we should waste our time because he's not. I actually want to ask you about the influence this has had globally, because I think that's really a cool, unintended positive consequence.
Yeah, one of the great delights of doing this work is obviously the United States is not the only country emitting carbon emissions around the world. And as I shared, we learned a lot from what was happening here in the UK when you all stopped the last new proposed coal plant. As we started shutting coal plants down in the United States, it inspired similar copycat campaigns in Europe, in South Korea, in Japan, in Australia. And so I'm thrilled to report we are at 75%, Europe's at 60%. Europe needs to catch up, by the way. But there are amazing campaigns going on where we're learning from each other, because oftentimes we're also dealing with international corporations, and so we can collaborate across the Atlantic or with our friends in Australia across the Pacific, or in South Korea. And that has been one of the great joys, because we're actually solving a global problem together.
Solving a global problem together is a good thing to do, but why are you not on a beach somewhere? At 50 million, you could have taken that and run. Do you know what I mean? That's a lot of money. But why did you not feel like you're done? Like when do you think you will feel like you're done? You're going to say when it's finished, aren't you? Yeah, he's got an actual solid number of coal plants left.
Well, I mean, one of the, we live on an amazing planet. There's been 100 billion people on this planet since first humans showed up. We're the last generation to solve this problem. And that's a pretty awesome, terrifying prospect. And I've had the good fortune of, as others find their niche, whether it's in fundraising or communications, of helping design and lead campaigns to solve a big piece of the puzzle. It's a lot of fun. So I'd get bored on the beach. Now, I like to go on a beach for a couple of weeks a year. But in terms of, I get to work with amazing people. I get to travel around the United States and around the world. That's a real privilege. So I love doing it, and I'll be doing it for a while because we ain't done yet.
In that vein, because we knew you weren't done. Spoiler alert. 5 years ago, we had you on the podcast. We talked about gas in buildings. I highly recommend you listen to that episode, if nothing, for no other reason than Ben's reaction to some of what Bruce talks about. But what I want to ask you is, in that time, since you started working on coal, you've now started to work on gas. What have we learned in the last 5 years when it comes to gas?
That is a great question. So I think one of the things that was super interesting about coal, when I started working on coal, a lot of people were like, as I shared earlier, it's impossible. We can't get rid of it. It's an integral part of our system. And oftentimes people also didn't realize where their electricity came from, that it was this filthy coal plant, that the mining was blowing up mountains in Appalachia, and the coal trains were going through communities dumping coal dust on them, and that the coal burning was hurting the local surrounding neighbors. And once they were aware of their system, they were like, hey, we want change. We developed a consensus. And largely in the United States today, other than our current president, most people recognize that coal has to go. And so that was not a consensus 20 years ago. We're at the same place on natural gas. So when you ask people, even in my home state of California, where's most of the pollution from? I bet you 10 out of 10 answers will not say natural gas. It's half of our emissions today. So one of the things exciting about London Climate Week is sort of listening and understanding where people are. When you think about carbon pollution, at least in the energy sector, it comes from coal, oil, and gas. People understand coal now. People largely understand oil has to go, and we got electric vehicles. But you get to natural gas, and people get very confused. It's a bridge fuel. It's clean. It's natural. And so what I'm excited about is developing a consensus. If we're actually going to solve this problem, we have to get off of gas. And in a city like London, in fact, most cities, half the emissions are from transport and half are from natural gas. And if you listen to this conversation in London today, no one is talking about natural gas, but it's half the problem. So this is very similar to where we were 20 years ago. People were not saying you got to get off of coal. So super excited about, we have the technology. We have heat pumps to replace to both cool places and heat spaces, and then we have induction cooking. So what have we learned in the last 5 years? We need to develop this consensus that gas has to go. But back 5 years ago, there was the emerging research that gas burning in our homes caused asthma. And that was what we got to talk about. Well, there's been a bunch of research then, and you said back then we don't like to scare our listeners, so let me just scare them for 30 seconds. We've been able to quantify that at a population level, gas stoves are responsible for about 12% of childhood asthma cases. 12% of asthma, which is an epidemic, we think we can trace back to gas stoves. Best science today. Secondly, it's not just it causes asthma, it also has benzene in it. Benzene is a carcinogen. And when gas stove is turned on, it releases benzene. But we also know that in about 40% of cases, when you turn off your gas stove, it's still leaking gas, and it has benzene in it. So brilliant research by the folks at Stanford, but we have not only does it's a twofer. Not only does it cause asthma, it also causes cancer. So gets better. But anyway, so it just underscores we need to make this transition. It's bad for the climate, and it's bad for health.
I mean, we had...
Sorry, I'm just saying what the heck under my breath. Like, if we know these things, why do people keep doing that money? Yep.
We had this in the 5 years ago, Ben. We were going to ask you, did you manage to get that gas stove out of your house?
No, not my parents' house. I don't have a gas stove in my house, though. We're making progress. Yeah. Slow progress, better than no progress.
I realize everyone in this room probably knows, but when you're talking about gas and buildings, can you just, for those of us who are hearing about this for the first time, what does that look like? What are we actually talking about here?
Yeah. Well, it's good you asked because I'd been working on climate and coal plants for almost 15 years when one of my colleagues at the Sierra Club came in and said, we're burning more gas in buildings in California than in power plants. I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, more gas is burned in California buildings than in our power plants. I was like, for what? Half of it in California is to heat water for showers and swimming pools. And I was like, this makes no sense. How can this be possible? California can't work out how to heat water without frying the planet. And then I went back thinking about my own home. I had 4 gas appliances, a water heater, a furnace, a dryer, and a stove. And I did the analysis. It was the biggest piece of my carbon footprint, other than my flying. And I was like, why has no one ever told me? Why we as an organization had never put out the 10 things you should do? Ride your bike, eat less meat. Number 1 or 2 on that list should be ditch your gas appliances. So that to me was the aha moment. It's like we have, and that gives us agency. One of the super exciting things about this opportunity is coal plants, you have to find a coal plant, and we're running out of coal plant targets. Gas is everywhere. So it's something we can solve at our home level, at our neighborhood level, at our school. So it's something that gives you a chance to be a part of something exciting, agency to solve this problem.
I mean, one of the things I think that is, I've actually never lived somewhere with so much gas stoves, like right in front of your face. It's actually quite interesting. We've had this conversation before about how the propaganda is really good, like around cooking and around how it's natural. And, like our confession, I think, when we did that episode with you was that we did not know that gas was a fossil fuel. Can we admit that?
I was going to say that right now.
And that I think is part of the narrative. But I guess the thing I'm curious about is you mentioned that like we're in a similar place now with that campaign as you were with coal. What are the tactics or lessons you can like bring over from the work on coal now that you're doing this work on gas?
Well, we're not starting from scratch. And one of the delights of coal is that tapping into people around the United States who wanted to do something, or already doing something, but just needed additional help. They needed some either resources or working with other communities to work out how to do this transition. On natural gas, there's a bunch of cool things going on. So in Germany right now, every community as a part of their climate plans is developing a heating plan for the cities. And that's opened up this conversation, like how should we heat our cities? Should it be with gas or something cleaner? So huge opportunity, and there's tons of people getting engaged in helping manage that transition. In the United States, we have a lot of cities that have begun to realize, how do we incentivize people to put in heat pumps, not gas furnaces? And so heat pump sales in the United States last year, and same in Europe, now are higher than gas furnaces. So the momentum is moving. Is it fast enough? No. But there's a lot of stuff to build on to really accelerate this progress. So the aperture is opening up to have a conversation about how are we actually going to get from here to a world where we're not powering our buildings with an explosive gas that also is a leading contributor to climate change.
So we mentioned earlier that you're now leading Climate Imperative, you're in philanthropy, and I'm curious to know, like, what are you most excited about in the philanthropic part of your work?
So I think it goes back to the early lessons from the work on coal, which is there are a ton of people out there trying to do their very best to solve this climate crisis around the world. And how do we help? What can we bring in terms of resources? And oftentimes it's not just financial resources, it's how are other communities solving this problem? So I was, what's a good example? So I was recently doing some work in the United States, and they were in a city, and they were talking about, well, we have these large heating plants that are providing district heating for a downtown area. What's the solution? Well, if you overlook in Germany, they're already solving this in a dozen communities. This isn't like waiting for a satellite on its way to Mars to find some new technology. This is something that's actually available on the market today. They just didn't know about it. And so I think having a global perspective, which I'd never had before, is super interesting because you can see cool stuff happening everywhere, and then connecting that so we can accelerate our bloody progress.
Yeah, I guess my question is, what now being on the other side of the philanthropic conversation. What advice? Thank you, everyone. What advice would you give to yourself going back? Like, if you could speak to yourself at the start of this journey, what would you say?
I think it's remember thinking about we're up against some really powerful interests, and if we're not aligned. And that isn't just with people who agree with us on everything, right? To win what we want on coal, we were working with rural farmers in Iowa who they may not agree with us on a bunch of things. They agreed with us on not coal plants in their backyard. And so building out a coalition that is big enough and powerful enough to overcome the inertia and the corporate interests who are slowing down this transition, making sure we don't lose sight of that. Because unless we have a broad enough, if we don't get the politics right, it's going to be really hard to sustain progress. So just keeping that front and center, like how do you build the coalition? And right now, with the war in Iran, the Ukraine mess still not resolved, and you look at the amount of money people are spending on fossil fuels, it is insane. We were just working with some folks in Japan. They import 90% of their energy in the form of coal, oil, and gas. Every day they spend $400 million to import oil, coal, and gas every day. The bill from the Iran war increased that by $150 million. So every day they're sending all this money out to buy fossil fuels when they could be investing in clean energy and their energy security. So it's not just a climate issue. In fact, in Japan, you don't talk about climate by and large. You just talk about, do you really want to be dependent on this fossil fuel that's weaving its way across the world that's costing you twice as much as it used to? So I think seizing the moment, building the coalitions, and also addressing people on the whole range of issues that may bring them into this conversation.
You know what my favorite thing is I've heard recently? I've heard this from Bill McKibben and from Tessa Khan, that the light from the sun travels 92 million miles to get to Earth, and not a single one of those miles goes through the Straits of Hormuz. It's really good. Yeah. Every time I hear it, I'm like, that's true. Bruce, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Incredible work.
Stay curious.
Thank you for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please hit the follow button to make sure that you get next week's release. While you're at it, please leave a rating and a review.
Now, let's shout out to our fabulous team behind the pod.
Executive produced by Josie Colter.
Produced by Ben Beheshti.
Music also by Ben Beheshti.
Communications by Tara Cooper and Izzy Gladstone.
Curation by Disha Chandra.
Hosted by Ben Hurst.
And Maryam Pasha.
And remember,
stay curious.